Wyckoff Sundays, episode 2.
All right. Welcome to Wyckoff Sundays episode 4. We are fully a month into our Wyckoff Sundays series here, which is exciting, right? We've had some pretty good analysis come over the last couple of weeks, right? We're going to review first last week, and then we're going to go ahead and talk about what maybe we can end up seeing this week happen, right? So let's go ahead and tap in, right? So some of the first things again that we spoke about was the potential of, either like really like when it came down to it, what we said this week was that we didn't really have like a clear idea in terms of like where we could really see dollar go from here, right? We recognized that we were really at the time in the middle of a range. Let me make this white here for a second. My bad. So we realized here that we were in the middle of a range between the low to the high, right? Whether things could really go bullish or bearish, right? We really wanted to just be in extreme areas to say so. So we kind of said like, all right, either one, we're going to look for buys down in this area, or two, we're going to look for price to distribute a little bit more in that area, right? Obviously, we're still kind of playing around with the idea that, maybe this entire zone here for dollar could be a higher time frame accumulation, Wyckoff accumulation. So we're kind of just keeping an eye out on the potential for, buys there, right? And so what ended up happening, we ended up opening right after Wyckoff Sundays, and we did end up driving down instantly, right? So for me, there wasn't really a setup to catch the sells to the downside unless you were positioned in it the week before, or if you had traded London session, I think, on going from Sunday to Monday, right? So again, I don't trade that session, right? I typically like to come back to the market, New York session on Mondays and let the market play out on Sundays, on its own. But what ended up happening, obviously, we did get a really nice sell-off. And then down in that low, right, we'll go ahead and see if we could find buys. We did end up finding buys last week, inside of when price came back into there, which we'll talk about a little bit later. So we did still play the buys from Wyckoff Sundays. And we did manage to catch a really nice winning trade with that idea. And also two trades that went into profit, hit 1 to 2, or almost 1 to 3, and then ended up reversing as well last week, right? So, we'll see how things go this week, but, we'll talk about that in a bit, right? So dollar, that was kind of our analysis, right? We saw pretty much an instant sell-off, right? This was the zone we were talking about, and that's where price has pretty much instantly fallen off from, right? So this is pretty much what we said last week would happen. That is what we saw. And then down in here, to see if we can see accumulations to then buy to the upside, right? So yeah, that's that for dollar. From there, we kind of look at things like EU and stuff, to kind of like align with that same idea, which we did kind of get, right? So obviously with dollar going to the downside, we saw EU going to the upside, to pretty much start off the week. And then from there, right, we kind of been holding a little bit, since that high, right? So, we'll go ahead and see what happens this week. I think it's going to be interesting, but I think we have a good chance of catching some trades that might still align with that idea this coming week. All right. Then we talked about gold, right? So we spoke that gold most likely has seen the bottom here when we went ahead and filled the gap there. And we spoke about obviously the biggest thing that we'd want to see would be price to be kind of like pull back into this area. I believe I said that, right? To go ahead and look for more buys. But again, it's also kind of in a tricky position when we got to Sundays because it was kind of in the middle again. Same with dollar, right? Like, between this low and this high, right? We're kind of in the middle, right? Even when it comes to buying here, like, if it comes to like higher time frame perspective, right? We're still between this low and this high. So it's still kind of like not the best area to go ahead and look for positions. Obviously what we'll talk about what ended up going on with gold a little bit after as well, right? But yeah, we didn't really have like all we really said was that most likely the bottom was set. And then same thing with silver. We did say maybe silver could come a little bit lower. I don't think we ended up making that lower low yet, right? So, we saw the price come up, right? We had some order flow, and then now we've sold off, back in our area where we said this would be our first area for buys. And then maybe below there, we could get our second area, maybe, right? But, this is not a bad area to look at, and we'll talk about that in a little bit as well. So yeah, that's gold and silver, right? Then we went into Bitcoin, I believe, right? So we spoke about the potential buys for Bitcoin. Obviously it did end up playing out later in the week, just not how we expected. Obviously, it's either two things happen, right? Like, I mean, one, we kind of react from this area here, which I believe we did sell off and react a little bit, but we didn't really make a new high. We kind of just like swept liquidity and then came back down. And then it looks like now we probably got into a reaccumulation. So I'm kind of thinking that, we might be seeing the bottom now for Bitcoin, but that's kind of the same idea is that we're kind of liking this low for potential buys from there was kind of what we were looking for, with BTC, right? And then after that, ETH, same thing, right? We were saying we kind of like this area here on ETH, where I did get some. And then, we have, what's it called? Indices, right? So indices, what we spoke about was that we probably again had also probably seen the bottom line the week before, with this, right? And we spoke about the potential though of price pulling back into this imbalance that happened here, to see if we could go ahead and look for buys there, right? So far, we didn't really get the buy side, but we did get price pulling back into all the higher time frame areas that we're talking about. But we haven't really seen a good accumulation with good timing just yet. I mean, it's decent, but nothing crazy really. We did get a little bit of a buy last week, right, in the zone. Some people in the group caught some sells here. But again, like we kind of spoke about how here the bigger time frame perspective is going to be inside of this low. So by the looks of it, I don't really like this low too much. I mean, again, we'll talk about that a little bit later, but yeah, again, like all of them really did start to come back into our zones there. But regardless, I did manage to catch a buy last week with Nas, to kind of align with that idea that we might have seen the bottom happen. Again, just kind of aligning New York session price action at the time, for buys there. But, from there, we ended up like distributing for the rest of the week. And the big move of the week was really the sell off. So we'll see if this week, we can end up, maybe playing around inside of these lows, and end up looking for buys. We'll see what happens. We'll talk about that later, right? But yeah, that's pretty much that for what we went over, right? So that's normally what we talk about, guys, is like all the indices. And then we talk about, like whatever you guys want to talk about, right? So if you guys have any specific pairs you guys would like me to go over, feel free to tap into it and we will tap into those at the end. But we're going to start off with these major pairs, all right? So dollar, all right, let's start there. So here's what we've seen since last week with dollar, right? From a bigger time frame perspective, right? We'll definitely tap into GJ for you at the end. But yeah, so from a higher time perspective here on dollar, right? Like I said, here it looks like we distributed, right? When Sundays really started out, right? Which I believe is here, right? So Sunday started out, we ended up pulling back up into, really nice area there, imbalance, right? We didn't quite get into the institutional candle, which again, isn't really normal for things that we want to see, really be long-term moves. But like there was a little bit of mitigation here, you could say, right? But because again, price did come down and we pulled back, right? So we did kind of get the mitigation and maybe it's just order flow. But, again, bigger time frame wise, we don't really see like a, price really pulling back into that area, right? We just see price kind of playing around as we come down, right? So not quite a mitigation phase. So that's why it's like, I don't know how much I like this for like long-term sells to hold from it. But we'll see, it did react from a decent area, right? It could be that price is just really bearish and we're just reacting from imbalances, right? Instead of reacting from, order blocks that we could potentially see over here, right? So yeah, that's kind of like, with Wyckoff Sundays, again, I wanted to see the push down. Like, I just couldn't really position myself to take advantage of it because it didn't happen with the right timing. And again, like, like New York, by the time New York session hit on Monday, we were already all the way down here, right? So after that happened, I ended up looking for potential ideas for buys on dollar, right? Again, this was the zone that we marked up on Wyckoff Sundays episode 3. And, again, price sold off really nicely into that zone, right? Looking like a potential accumulation, right? Right before the news event hit here, right? Because this candle right here, this major push to the upside right there is a news event, right? I believe it was NFP, if I'm not mistaken, on Wednesday last week. And we saw the market really charge above these highs, and attack that liquidity to the upside, right? The way then USD JPY follows on. Uh, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But yeah, like when we get into currency pairs, for that, right? But more so, like what I was really observing there was just that a lot of the times when I see like moves happen in dollar, typically USD CAD ends up going first, and then all the rest of the pairs end up following after. Like typically UJ sometimes actually a little bit ahead sometimes too. But like, like UCAD especially, like I've noticed a lot is like whenever these moves happen, like UCAD moves first for some reason. Don't know why, right? I don't know what it is about UCAD, but yeah. And then it ends up doing bigger pips. So UCAD is a little bit more of an interesting asset there. Like I don't really touch into it as much. I really like to play EU, GU, AU, NU. But anyways, yeah, that's the idea. So yeah, so again, right, like kind of looking like we might have had accumulation type price action here, right? Kind of looking at it being like this push to the upside here, kind of being like our first drive up, right? Again, really how impulsive that was, I really like. And then looking at that being maybe our, trading range, for the schematic, right? And it kind of fits with how the rest of the, time that we have been, right? Like, because we've been consolidating a lot inside of this area. And so like, again, it does look like we're respecting that high and that low as a potential trading range. So let me go ahead and mark up that trading range there, right? So, kind of the price action that we wanted to see is present, for it, right? Now, the main, thing that we want to know now is like, this high here, right? Kind of throws off our idea a little bit where like things can kind of go either way because it's either one, this accumulation is going to hold up, or two, this push to the upside here is a manipulation to have like a redistribution, right? So let me go ahead and pull up a redistribution here so you guys can see what I mean because we don't really know which one it's going to be until we really start to break out, but there are signs in this that make it look like it could be like that it could be like a redistro type of scenario, right? So let me go ahead and just kind of show you guys the redistro. So here it is over here, right? This one is the redistro schematic, right? So a redistribution schematic starts off with an accumulation here, as we can see, right? Where we get the market going ahead and, trading down, right? Making that, accumulation schematic happen with our SCAR, right? STM phase B and our spring. And then typically after that, we end up getting the market go ahead and attack the high of our accumulation and then start to work its way back down, right? So that could be the case for what we're seeing here, because after we had NFP, we have not had the market break away from that NFP high. And the way that NFP happened is very similar to how we would kind of look at, institutional candles in a way, right? Because here we have, again, our this is where NFP started, right? So this is 8:30 candle open, right? NFP opens and then boom, we had a huge buy up, right? Bringing us all the way up to here. Okay. And then from there, we ended up seeing the market sell off, again, very aggressively, right? And so we haven't actually seen price break to the downside. We haven't seen price break through the upside, right? And again, with me, I was still kind of looking for more of the buy ideas, because of, again, like our higher time frame bias there that we could potentially be playing with, an accumulation schematic on the daily, on the weekly. So I'm trying to follow that, right? But really with what we've seen here, that push to the upside could change the game. But if we get a breakthrough, then I really like this to be maybe even a low that goes ahead and brings us all the way back up to 98, above 98 here, right? Where this can end up being a distribution, turns into an accumulation here, and then we end up seeing price reverse to the upside, right? So we're like, for me personally, like even if I want to see this be a redistribution, we typically don't see redistributions like holding so long, like the lows, right? Like we've just been holding and holding and holding the lows. We've been getting good buy setups at the right timing, right? This was like New York session open on the Thursday. You know what I'm saying? Like this was, even this low here was us doing, what do you call it? CPI, right? We had CPI here that kind of started to sweep down, looked like there was a buying opportunity that we caught short term last week, and then price ended up making a new low. But personally, guys, like if we can hold this low here, right? I think that this can really end up being a rally, this coming week, right? And even me looking at some of the dollar pairs, like they kind of more align with what I'm looking for there as opposed to the other side. So I'm still leaning towards that way. So either one, I mean, not necessarily holding this low, sorry. I would say more so this low, where we had that potential spring happen, right? So again, we're kind of looking at this as our SCAR, ST, right? ST and phase B to our UT, and then coming down to our spring, right? So after that spring, we do have imbalance here. So that's what I have marked up, right? That could even be an incentive that we could be doing. Like maybe we're going to go ahead and sweep this week, right? Get into that area. And then maybe there we can like look for a type 3 setup or something like that to go ahead and give us a potential, buy opportunity in that area to confirm. But that would be kind of the idea there, right? But again, guys, like really the way I see it right now is this could really go either way, right? It could either be that, this ends up being an accumulation that just continues, right? This accumulation just continues, or it could be that this is just a redistribution, right? Accumulation happens, we shoot up above the high of the accumulation, and then we reverse, right? So far, the price action that I'm seeing makes it look to me more like it is still a valid accumulation, right? That we're still accumulating. And so that's what I'm going to be working with next week. We'll see how it goes, right? Because right now, I mean, if it does end up being a sell setup, then we've kind of already missed the entry here, right? Like truthfully. So again, there is possibility of it being a sell setup, all this liquidity here, sweeping it, right? We ended up getting that late last session on Friday, right? To then give us that push down. But for me personally, guys, like, I would still like to see what happens in here and see if it makes sense to buy in there. If we start to break through, then I don't know, like I'm gonna have to wait for a whole nother accumulation to really play out to really give me the indication that this can buy. So basically what I'm telling you guys is I wouldn't use this zone again, right? Like, if we were to like tap back into here or anything, like I don't think I would use this zone again. But maybe we can see what happens after we sweep some internal lows. if that's what we decide we want to do, right? But for now, guys, I'm still playing with the idea of potential buys down here, like 96.64. But again, that's less higher time frame analysis there, right? So we have to more see like what ends up happening when we do tap into that zone, right? Because right now, higher time frame wise, all we have is this big candle up, right? Kind of makes it look like it could be a redistribution, right? But hopefully that's not the case. So yeah, that's what we end up looking for right there, right? If that doesn't end up happening, right? And maybe we do get up into here, right? And we use this high as like a liquidity, right? Maybe we end up getting like we could do like a redistribution scenario even there too. So we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. But really, these are the main two zones I'm paying attention to, right? This is where we look for buys at 96.665. That's what I personally want to go into, to kind of see if this whole push down that we had on Sunday could just be a sweep. And then next week, we end up seeing the push to the upside happen here. Personally, I think that's something that can make a lot of sense, to then even engulf the whole thing. But if not, then we can look and see what happens here. And if we distribute or not and start to walk down, then we can look to see if there's sells in here, guys. But personally, I'm leaning towards the buy side for dollar this week. Okay. Now that we kind of have that idea with dollar, right? We want to go into currencies and kind of see how that aligns with, that there, right? And, when I kind of look at the possibility of things going kind of either way, like again, things like NU and all that stuff could potentially be similar, in terms of that, right? Because here we see, like, for example, NU, we had a really nice distribution that happened last week, right? We had like, there was a good sell opportunity up here that unfortunately we didn't take, but we did manage to get something else later on in the session. But again, like we had like, this sell idea that pushed us down. And, if this is the distribution, then now we've pretty much come below the low of our distribution, right? We did so with the sweep and we're starting to hold up the lows here. So, if we were looking for this to again like be buy like a buy scenario for dollar. Sorry, if we were looking for a sell scenario for dollar, right, then the scary part would be all right if this could end up being like a reaccumulation, where again, like we do end up taking the low of the distribution and then we start to work our way up. But again, like I think that this could also end up being like our signs of weakness part of the distribution. So let me kind of pull up a distro here. That's our type 1. That's our type 2 that I have there. Okay, let me just pull up the whole thing. So yeah, here in our distro, right, I think it's possible that, we might have had our tests, right? And I think we might be in our signs of weakness right now, right? To go ahead and, like go below the low and then we just continue to go down. Personally, I don't really like to play those that much, like after we've seen the signs of weakness happen. So yeah, but again, I do still think this, like it doesn't look the best for, continuations because we did kind of like, sweep down here, with that, right? But honestly, guys, like when I look at the bigger time frame, I see mostly wicks here, right? Mostly wicks that are aligning with these lows there, right? Versus like actually really seeing really good candles there as well. Yeah, so that's kind of like what I'm thinking here with this. And the way that we really push to the upside here looks really good for a higher time frame distribution, right? So that's kind of what I'm thinking there for NU. And then even with like things like AU as well, which obviously relates really heavily, right? If I could find it, here it is. Again, it's like we do have like we do have a similar distribution price action here with this entire thing, right? This whole thing here looks like a distribution to me. Could this be the reaccumulation moment? Maybe, but it like look at these candles here, right? Big wicks down, right? Versus having really nice candles and then very, very lows that are very, very close to each other, right? So for me personally, I think that leans more towards like actually going to the downside. So if I were to look for a higher time frame zone here on AUD USD, I'd probably look to get into this imbalance there above these highs and see if we can get reactions from AU in that area this week. And then go ahead and like target down towards these lows, right? The other scenario would be, if we again like kind of saw a sweep of these lows, right? Maybe that would change the scenario when I get back into here. But if we can hold these lows here and then get us back up into these areas, I think I would personally still like this for, potential short opportunities, for the short term, right? So we'll see, or maybe the long term, right? But we'll see how it goes with AUD USD, right? And then GU as well, right? GU was the one we managed to catch sells on up here, right? We were kind of hoping that news could continue that, but unfortunately it didn't, right? We ended up getting a short-term sell-off down to here. But so far, like, what I see with GU is like if you were going to make the case for the dollar sells, GU seems the most ready for it, right? With the way that we have, again, like, done this order flow here, right? Really nice down candle there, really nice down candle there. This aligns with the news event before we start to buy back up. So I can't lie, GU actually out of all of them looks the best. But even me, when I was in these sells here, right? Like obviously I took partials, but I was really expecting us to break below these lows here. I didn't really like the way those lows were made. But we ended up respecting them, right? We ended up holding this low here before coming up. So again, could be a sign that we sell off again. But again, maybe we do end up getting something here. Where last week, again, like on Wyckoff Sundays, we spoke about this zone here on GU, right? That zone ended up playing out like to the T perfectly, right? Last week when we had this buy up here on GU. So GU was the main one I remember we were talking about last week for currency. And this ended up being the nicest, right? For the sells, right? Unfortunately, it happened prior to me waking up on Wednesday, right? Because this happened at like around 6 a.m. But after that, we ended up getting the top of the market for the week, right? So again, according to Wyckoff Sundays, this was the zone we were looking for, and it played out perfectly, with what we were thinking, right? Because over here we had a previous redistribution that had played out, right? So maybe our incentive is to sweep this high that we initially got our entry in, and then maybe from there we end up seeing, a mitigation to then bring price down, right? That could be a scenario, and that would align with our idea to see dollar go into that imbalance and then buy back up, right? So if we can see both of those happen at the same time, it's going to be a lot more high probability that we can maybe end up getting, again, sells down from those areas. We'll see how it goes, right? But, again, I think GU does kind of look the strongest at the moment with these lows that happened here. And I like AU, a lot for the sells as well, right? Then we have Euro USD, again, just like holding these highs here. If we were to, again, do that same thing with dollar and like get down into that imbalance, then EU would probably end up sweeping these highs here, getting back into this previous zone there where we saw potential order flow, and then maybe dropping off down from there, right? We do have a big wick here on the bottom, very high volume, right? So I'm thinking like, again, maybe we do end up getting lower than that at least. Okay, so we'll see. We'll see, right? But that's kind of just like what I'm seeing so far there with AU and that kind of stuff, right? Things like UCAD as well, ended up trading away last week really nicely. And we had price coming back into a previous accumulation, accumulating again, and then continuing to start to create order flow here. When I look at the immediate highs on USD CAD, on the bigger time frame, I don't really see, like a high here that is really high probability to look for sells, right? To me, this looks like relatively equal highs. So again, that's also why I kind of favor, again, like it does look like we can get higher there. So if we were to, again, see something happen where we might get a pullback on UCAD, like down into here where we had Thursday price action, or maybe even lower, right, to go ahead and fill in balance down here, right? Then we end up holding these highs, then I think this can end up being a really simple target for us to shoot to the upside, right? But I think if we leave these highs, it'll probably end up being there. But we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But I do think these highs can be a sign of things to come, maybe to go ahead and see again that next push to the upside, come into the market there, right? USD Chef, this is what we played last week on Friday. We managed to find a nice short-term, lower time frame buy opportunity here. Ran for about a 1 to 3, shooting above some of these highs. And then after that, we ended up getting a huge crash back down. So hopefully you guys got partials in that area where I told you guys to after we hit the 1 to 3. Or just took full profits in this idea here, right? Now we're coming a little bit lower. So we'll see how this can end up going, right? It does kind of look like we're going to go below here, but what I can see is a really nice accumulation sitting in this area here, right? So from there, having the order flow still hold would look like this yellow zone holding. So maybe we do end up sweeping here, right? Getting down towards this order flow, and then from there looking for the next buy up. I do still like that, personally, for me, bigger time frame wise, but we'll see, right? Again, we are in a very key zone, right? Like when we did have that buy back up, like we took every piece of internal liquidity possible on the bigger time frame. So again, if I were to see something like again, look like a type 1 setup, I mean, this looks pretty good like a type 1, right? In the sense of like, all right, this could be our manipulation, right? This could be our impulsive pushing to the upside. This could be us coming back for our mitigation, and then lower time frame in here. We get another manipulation, sweeping all the internal liquidity, right? And then starting to walk our way back up, right? Maybe we can see that still happen, right? We have equal highs sitting right over here, right? These are pretty equal highs right there, right? Maybe we end up going and targeting that, and then even when we look even, here, right? We got trend lines there and stuff. We're in a higher time frame low here, right? Again, with more liquidity up top. So I wonder if this can be something like that, but who knows? We'll see, right? It could make sense, I think, for again, if it does end up being a reaccumulation, what? Oh, I got charged for Zoom. Okay. I was like, who just charged me right now? So yeah, here we got USD, CHF potentially for sweeps down into this level, and then, maybe buys coming in from there, right? But yeah, guys, I mean, again, like if I were to think that this was going to be a redistro, like for the DXY, you would think that, the other pairs would align a little bit better with that idea. And personally, I don't see it that much. I don't see it that much. We'll see how it goes, right, with that. But yeah, like again, like that push to the upside could be an institutional candle, right? Or it could just be that, that's our first sign of, strength. And then now we're starting to get back into the range, accumulate again. Maybe we get another sweep, right? That's what I would personally like to see is that last sweep down below 68.70. And then see if we can respect this low here at 68.48. But only time will tell how we really see this play out. Okay. So that's the dollar pairs, and that is the dollar, right? Let's go ahead and tap into gold. All right. So gold looks interesting. Pretty much what we've been saying has been holding up, in the sense that, again, like last week, we spoke about, again, this low being really nice, how we just got right back into that gap, before we started to walk up to the upside. And then here we can see again, like how the market did it this week was we ended up holding, all this liquidity pretty much all week, right? I know sellers probably, again, were pretty frustrated inside of this, because we weren't getting that, push below the liquidity. And again, this is why it's so important to like take partials in key areas, like even if we're coming towards liquidity, because we don't know when that liquidity is really going to break, right? And in this case, we did end up getting that liquidity, sweep to happen, later on, right, on Thursday, pretty much aligning with, New York session, right, with that huge push to the downside. And again, we tapped into a really nice zone here, right? So we have here this trap candle, right? Price tapped into that trap candle. So could this be a, like a phase D type of entry for, gold, right? It has some potential, to be honest, to actually do that, right? Like I was kind of thinking like, again, I wanted to see price like really get above here, to really confirm like the bullishness type of thing. Cause again, we could just be coming into this trap candle and rejecting. But again, like how we're looking now, like is not bad. The one thing I didn't like about this though was again like this big wick here, very, very high volume low, right? We don't normally see that, align with bottoms, with market bottoms there, right? Typically, we'll end up seeing price actually take those lows, right? And maybe accumulate again before we start to do it. So maybe, again, this isn't the bottom here, right? Maybe we don't, come all the way back up, to be honest, even though I am overall bullish on it. Maybe this just ends up being the beginning, right? This maybe ends up being our SC to our AR, and then we kind of go into a consolidation for a while, right? Getting our ST and phase B, right? Getting our spring, and then from there kind of test, right? We'll see, right? But really, again, the biggest thing for me is like long wicks like that. Don't like to see long wicks plus big volume to me means it could potentially just be the beginning of the accumulation and not the end of it. I think there are probably a lot of people positioned here after that drop. And then, like obviously maybe they're still holding it, right? So personally, guys, I wouldn't be surprised to see this not be the bottom and to see us maybe get deeper into this zone over here, right? So that's what I'm personally looking for, for it, right? I'm not gonna like, again, I don't like to short into areas, that I'm looking for buys. So I'm not looking for shorts or anything like that, but I'm personally just waiting because I didn't position myself in these buys here, or there, to be honest, because again, not my timing. Except for this was my timing, but again, I didn't really think it was a bottom. But over here, this was during Asian session and stuff, and this one here as well. This was during London. So, the only New York session one I had was here, but it was Monday. I didn't even trade on that Monday. I remember that. So yeah, just like, again, not really the best New York session opportunity. So hopefully with this next pullback that happens, we do get a New York session opportunity to look to buy and hold gold. We'll see, right? But that's what I prefer, guys. I'd prefer to see us get again below 48.80. See that wick get cleaned up, see us get some lows that aren't so high volume. Because like if we look at this low here, it's extremely high volume, right? The last time we got that high volume was like all the way back here, right? So could be interesting to see something more like that and then getting an accumulation happen from there. But only time will tell, right? We're already like almost back, like engulfed the down move that happened. So it could be that that's it too. If we do start to like break out through here, would I still be waiting for those lows to get taken? Probably not, because now we've seen a full buy to sell motion, right? If we react from here, right, we hold these highs and we continue to get back down, truthfully, I might start to look for, again, more buys down into that level. So that would be my ideal situation for buys, right? If it doesn't come, then it doesn't come, and that's okay, right? Silver, right? Similar ideas, right? Last week, we spoke about how, this could be the bottom, but, also it could be that it's honestly just the beginning, and maybe we do end up getting another spring out below these lows. Or we just end up holding here, right? Because again, if we did end up getting a spring out, I think like our next point of interest is at like $50 or something. So it's like, can we really get down to there? I don't know. So I'm still going to be looking inside of this specific area here to see if we can hold that, right? Because I do like how we took this low there for gold, I mean for silver. But again, like in terms of the current low, we see that gold has already traded away quite a bit, right? Silver has not. So if gold gets that pullback, silver probably will too, right? And so like, probably below here, we can look to see if we get like accumulation type price action in this higher time frame low. Since this is like a 2 hour, 1 hour point of interest, we can get down to that 15, that 5 and start to look for, our entry models to see if it makes sense to buy from there. And then from there, if not, then again, we'll take another attempt. If this ends up being like a 3 drive push down, right? We end up getting a spring, then again, maybe we look for buys inside of the spring potentially. Just depends on how silver wants to play out, right? But again, like I said before, I do think that the way that this sell-off was way too abrupt, way too fast. I don't really think that it's necessarily the top, because of that. And I think that we probably will end up seeing a recovery. It's just about when, right? So I do think it's going to be a good opportunity, but we just got to be patient to try and find out where that's going to be. And it's worth taking multiple attempts. It's worth taking an attempt inside of this low. It's worth taking an attempt if we go lower. Just to like, again, like, you don't want to be taking like a bunch of attempts, but if we do end up seeing that recovery that we're looking for, seeing that next push to the upside would end up being a very high risk to reward play. So even taking losses, trying to find it, might be worth it, right? Well, we'll see how it goes. We'll see how it goes. But I'm thinking still, again, I don't think this is the bottom here necessarily. If we do see the engulfment back up above this high, then yeah, then maybe we did it. That is the sell to buy motion. But as of right now, not really too crazy moves. So maybe we do end up getting a push lower below this low and then creating an opportunity for us to buy back up. So eyes on metals this week for sure. I think I have between this week and next week. We'll see what ends up happening. But definitely eyes on metals this week, for us, right? Now let's go into crypto. Okay. So crypto, kind of what I'm thinking. Ooh, we're getting a nice sell-off. So kind of what I'm thinking potentially we could have had last week was again a sweep on lows that kind of reaccumulated down in here, right? So again, like we had the market like really have this fast push to the downside, and then we had this order flow starting to play here, right? Pretty much what we tapped back into was our last point of order flow that brought us all the way up to here, right? So when we're in this low, we have that sweep, pull back, and we come higher, right? Then after that, right, we kind of play around for the rest of the time and we pull all the way back into that zone there. And to me, bigger time frame wise, this kind of looks like it might have been an accumulation after we got below those lows here, right? So I'm kind of thinking that this might have been an accumulation there, right? In this zone here for BTC. So again, like looking in that area for buys could be a play. It looks like we had a recent distribution up here. So again, like maybe this can end up being like a reaccumulation again, right? In this low, right, would be kind of what we would look for, right? So like even potentially tonight, I know BTC likes to move on Sundays, after like 7, 8, 9 p.m. So maybe look at this tonight. If we do end up getting like a sharp down move there, maybe we can end up getting a move out of this zone here. So we can see really the sell-off that brings us down below this low starts right around there. So that's around where we'd want the market to come to. We want the market to go ahead and mitigate that zone. So I think for BTC, that's what I'm thinking. I'm still bullish on it. I want to see us like recover, even if it's just a relief bounce and it's not long term, right? I think we could do that. Ooh, looking at ETH here. ETH is pushing a lot lower, getting closer to my entry there. I mean, it's not bad where we reacted from, I can't lie. Let's see what happens in here for sure, right? It might even be that we're going to drive a little bit lower for ETH than we are with BTC. Because again, we can see BTC and ETH are in very different places, right? Maybe when BTC goes ahead and sweeps down here, ETH will diverge and end up going either deeper down into here or, like maybe even below this low, to be honest, by the looks of it. That divergence can happen, right? Where BTC holds and then, something like ETH will drop below. In which case, sad. But not that sad. It's fine. But yeah, so we'll see how this goes. We'll see how this goes bigger time frame wise, but I am still bullish on these, right? I do think that this down move here was very pronounced, right? Very fast. And I do think that like, again, 46% down, like I have to buy it because then it's like 80% if we end up going back up to that zone, right? And again, this is more like long-term holds, like we're talking long-term investments because, again, if we do end up getting back up into here, right, that's like literally already like 100% gain, almost from there, right? Like 89% gain, right? Because if something drops 40%, when it comes back up, it's going to be going up 80%, right? If you buy at the bottom kind of thing, right? So that's why I was like, all right, the risk to reward feels worth it to me to start to like, DCA. Even though, obviously it could be, we're bearish and, maybe it could be the case, right? That this is like, the bear run or whatever. But, I like it. I personally like it. And until we, really break below here, I mean, that's going to be the really scary part. And then maybe we're going to end up going to 30, which is kind of, I think, like worst case scenario is like here. Um, but only time will tell. Only time will tell. But with me, like I was saying, I think that this cycle is going to be different. I think that it's like really when it comes to regulation and all that kind of stuff, right? We spoke about it all last time, but and the institutional adoption that we're seeing now, I think that this bear cycle can be a little bit different, compared to other bear cycles. It might be shorter. I think demand is going to start being more continuous, and so things like this, like for example, if this was indices, like I'd be wanting to buy this back up for sure, right? Because again, like indices has that steady increase, that steady demand. Why? Because there's more institutional adoption inside of indices, right? And that's kind of how we want to see BTC and crypto and these major cryptos evolve as we get more and more institutional money is going to be again to like look for like again like that demand to be more continuous for the down moves to be less pronounced. That would be kind of what we would want. Again, only time will tell. Only time will tell. But we're at the top of the last cycle here, if we can see that as well. So we'll see, right? Maybe it's just the beginning. Maybe we do get a little bit more of an accumulation. But that's personally what I'm going to be playing with right now. I do like the way that this low here happened. So I'm going to use this as a point of interest this week and see if we can get the next leg to the upside there. Okay. So all we're going to look for is just, all right, can this distribution that definitely happened here become a reaccumulation as we tap back into this previous reaccumulation here? And then the target would be around 72K, probably even further, to be honest, like getting up to these equal highs of 79 or 74. 74 is over here, right? 74 is like a really conservative target as well. So for a day trade, it could be a really good opportunity, but we'll see how this plays out. We'll see how this plays out. But it did come into a good area. We did sweep really nicely. So now it's just about coming back into there and then seeing if we can buy from there. And yeah, that'll be kind of the idea, right? So focus in on this push to the downside and then scale in on smaller time frames to see if we can get entries. And this would be the only thing I'd pay attention to tonight. I like to pay attention to BTC on the weekends. Sometimes it likes to do that. We'll see if it's going to be the same way this time, but who knows, right? Look for big sweeps after 7 p.m. though for BTC. Okay. Now, indices. Okay. So indices, we're going to be going and seeing again, similar things of what we saw, right? So, some people caught sells last week, which was nice. Going ahead and having big sell-offs from that area, right? We do end up having this imbalanced price action right in here that we were kind of looking for price to sell back into. For me, again, like I just want to stay on the bullish side of things, right? Even though I really hate this liquidity here, I can't lie. It's hard to call it liquidity when there's so much order flow within it, right? Like there's sweeps happening in all of the lows, right? So it could easily just be order flow. And that's why I'm always very cautious with trendline liquidity. But we'll see how this all plays out, right? Because if NASDAQ starts to like break below this low, for example, then maybe we're going to get a bigger pullback than anticipated, right? I did think that this is going to be the bottom here where we had this sweep, right? But again, even from that sweep, we didn't technically make a higher high. So it's possible that we, start to sell off, right? But for me, guys, like, again, I like to stay on the side of trend, right? And so I'm still going to be looking for buys on these pairs, right? I don't know if I trust the Friday lows to do that, right? But maybe we do end up getting price coming lower, maybe even internal sweeps. With this low here, this would be our last point of internal liquidity there. Maybe that's what we get, but again, big wicks here and stuff. I don't really like it that much. To look for the buys here. But we'll see how price ends up playing out. But again, right now, as we're kind of in the middle, right? We're kind of in the middle between like the low and the high. And so it's like, we'd like to get in a more extreme area to really start to, again, if we do see the right price action in more extreme areas, it becomes a little bit more high probability and a lot higher risk to reward for us to look for that next push to the upside. Right, guys? So that's the idea there. All right, we'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's kind of what I am looking for and looking forward to is like maybe another push down on NAS, still playing with this zone as a potential bottom. And we're going to go ahead and see if price does give us an accumulation in here so we can continue to look for buys, right? Same thing with US 30, right? I'm probably going to want to look in here or maybe unless we end up clearing all this liquidity, right? But, I'm still going to look for things in here and see if we can end up getting a reaccumulation to play out, right? Because we definitely had a distribution up here. Now the question is, can this be a reaccumulation to align with our higher time frame trend? See if we can get that next buy up. If we do get a reversal, in terms of like a bigger time frame reversal, then, we're going to have to start to switch to be bearish later on. But for right now, it's like I don't really have the full confidence that this is going to be that distro. So maybe we'll see. There's a lot of stuff going on in the world right now, Epstein files, et cetera, et cetera. Maybe it's not great for the US economy. Who knows? Right, we'll see how it goes. Um, yeah, same thing with S&P, right? Either we hold this low or, again, I think down here is a lot better, for it, to be honest. But yeah, we did see a recent sweep of these lows. So maybe we can see that continue, right? These are the kind of areas that I do want to play in. So we're in the areas that we spoke about from last week, right? These are the areas we spoke about last week on Wyckoff Sundays. We sold into them. So now it's like, all right, this week, can we see, the buy continuations come from here? I personally hope so. Because again, these are the type of things I like to position in longer term. I really like indices, for the buys, obviously. So we'll see. We'll see. Okay, so that's pretty much all the major pairs that we wanted to go into, right? I saw a request for GJ, so we'll go ahead and tap into GJ, right? Damn, look at that. So we did have a really nice sell-off happen here with GJ. Obviously, we're overall bullish, like as a whole when it comes to trend here, right? But we do see some of the JPYs like really flipping, AJ starting to flip there at the top, CJ as well, I was seeing started a down move, right? UJ even as well, like we spoke about this distribution, I think a few weeks ago. Price finally ended up trading back into it and selling off on a freaking Sunday, so we couldn't position, right? NZD JPY, same thing, big sell off, right? We're kind of seeing pushes back down, right? So honestly, not looking the greatest for buys just yet. Yeah, across the board on JPYs, right? So personally, if there's one that I really like for sells, it'd probably be more EJ to get back up into here. In that case, GJ would probably do a similar thing, right? So maybe looking for, some imbalance fills here on the daily could end up being a play, right? So like right up in there, right? And just kind of see if we could follow this, new trend here that happened here, right? With GJ, it's interesting because we did actually like break the high with a lot of the other pairs here. I don't think this broke highs, right? So let's see, February 4th. Let's see what that looks like here. Yeah, see, so, well, actually we did. Oh, we even broke it here on AJ. February 4th, February 4th, oh, February 4th, we did break here on CJ as well, just barely, right? But yeah, it does look like divergences, manipulations happening at the top, guys. Like maybe we can like start to look for, the reversals to, come back down. But again, it's a little bit dangerous, right? And again, like I feel like with what's happening with, GJ, that they're starting to raise their interest rates and stuff, technically that is, you know, um, bullish for JPY, right? Which would mean bearish. Uh, sorry, opposite, right? It would be bearish for JPY, so it'd be bullish for these pairs, right? Because money's going to be moving out of the JPY if they're going to start raising interest rates. So, yeah, but technical analysis wise, interesting zone here, right? Lots of divergences happen at the top across the board, right? Some pairs held highs on the same days, some pairs didn't, right? Which again is signs of manipulation when we see those correlated pairs moving a little differently. So yeah, GJ, we have some reason here to start to look for things to flip. So yeah, only time will tell there again with everything, right? In terms of this. But yeah, that's kind of again the higher time frame perspective of what I'm looking for here, guys, right? You know, we'll see if this ends up being, on the daily time frame, if this ends up being an actual institutional down candle here that, again, like takes out these lows, right? And then maybe we're in the mitigation phase right now, right? To then make the new high. if that's the case, again, maybe this whole thing is going to be a higher time frame accumulation, which could be exciting for us, right? We love to see trend shifts, right? Because obviously we've been trending down since like, since last year, right? Since the beginning of 25 is when we really saw this pronounced down move happen. I did want to see originally dollar get into here like 93, but again, we've been trading in this consolidation like for a really long time, right? Like we said, like 300 days or so. So, yeah, I'm still playing with that idea, right? If we do start to break down, it's going to look a lot less likely. And again, maybe it's just very bearish and we did, fill in balance here. That's possible, right? But again, I like to align with the side that really gives me the New York session, ideas. And I think that here we might get that, happening, right? So yeah, guys, paying attention to this here on dollar, this week, and then, gold and stuff as well. We kind of got the ideas of what we want to see happen, right? Personally, I still want to see this get lower than that wick there. Don't like that wick at all, right? On multiple time frames. So yeah, we'll see how it goes. All right, guys, but that's pretty much that for Wyckoff Sunday, right? Did it a little bit quickly because I do have to head out real quick before my next call. But yeah, guys, hopefully, you guys got some value from this, and we'll see how these things end up playing out next week. All right. And yeah, guys, don't forget to be on the sessions Tuesday to Thursday. We're gonna be going live. So yeah, that'll be that, guys, and I'll catch you guys on the next one. All right, much love, much appreciation, and yeah, peace out.